So Gray Zone Warfare has entered early access earlier this week, and this is a guide for anyone jumping into it because for a lot of players, it may be comparable to another experience that you've had, but for a lot of players, it may seem overwhelming with how much there is to do. In this video, we're taking a comprehensive look at the game in an easy to understand fashion beginner's guide. So drop your thoughts, do me a huge favor and drop a like to help the video out in the algorithm, and make sure you subscribe for more FPS coverage. For now, let's get into it because there is a lot to go over. First things first, choosing factions. This will be the first thing you'll see when you boot up the game is your choice of factions. You have the Lemang Recovery Initiative, a PMC founded by a tech billionaire focused on philanthropic exercise searching for survivors in and around Ground Zero on the map. You have the Mithras Security System, a PMC for soldiers by soldiers, and you have the Crimson Shield International, a PMC that boasts a 95% success rate despite their methods being questionable. Now, so far, none of this matters in terms of choice for gameplay decisions. All the tasks and such are the same currently across the board. Backstory and lore only serve the greater narrative as you discover it further. However, do not pick this randomly because if you want to play with friends, all friends must be in the same faction. Friends will not populate in your search if they are not in the same faction as you. Now, previously, factions could not be switched until the next game cycle, but a recent addition actually has, since launch, allowed you to reset your account where you can re-choose your designated faction, but this will entirely wipe everything that you've done. So not necessarily a bad thing if you're a fresh account and you're brand new to it and you mistakenly chose the wrong faction and want to join your friends as you start, but not a great idea if you've already put a few hours into your journey as is on that existing faction. So just know that going in. As for basic menu functionality, you're going to see Warfare versus Joint Operations. This is essentially just choosing your PvPvE option versus PvE is your joint operations. You can play how you'd like. The server listings, find one closest to you, but these will be persistent, meaning you can leave and join back in, and in theory, things won't be touched from how you left them. Now, if more and more players do join in and alter the world around you, obviously won't be the same, but persistent, air quote, lobbies will be a thing here. Social functions, you have your player level and details up top, simply what you'd think, your level and your account. Squad, this will show who's in your squad and who you can invite. Again, has to be the same faction as you to do so. Chat, this is where you can end up finding not only just chats and invites from your friends, but also where you'll find vendor rewards and items, so that's actually much more useful than just sending a whisper to your friend. Friends, again, your populated friends list based on faction selection, and settings, where you can adjust all your settings in terms of graphic settings, FOV, keybinds, and more. Might have a settings video here out in the future. I'm not sure, kind of gauging interest in seeing how worthwhile it'd be to have, but PC is always tricky with that kind of stuff. It's not so much a one-size-fits-all like with consoles. PCs are way more individualized, so it's tougher to recommend settings. Like, I can't necessarily recommend my settings at native 4K to someone who's running on the minimum specs that the game will operate on. Getting into game, once you spawn in, you'll have the ability to spawn at one of 3 base camps. Base camps are entirely dependent on your faction selection. They're static and do not move. Whatever faction you choose, that will be your base camp for, again, the duration of the wipe, or if you decide to wipe your account and choose a new faction. But whatever faction you choose, that's where you're at. This should have some protection to it. Friendly fire is turned off, but the initial locale that you have around you, you'll have a local town or village nearby, and this will be, again, based off of where you end up choosing, and this is where most of your initial quests or tasks that vendors have for you will come from. You initially have 2 landing zones as well, and with both marked locations on the map and landing zones, as you discover more, you'll gain more access to them. So this means more locations to fast travel to, more locations to explore regularly, and more to gain from those. If you open up your in-game options with tab or escape, you can take a look at the map overall, your character and your health, the existing vendors, and the tasks at hand. The map is pretty self-explanatory, showing you where you are and what's around you, though a few tips for your further use. Friendlies are marked as blue on your map, your squad marked in green. So use that to your advantage. If you know there's someone around you, AI or PMC, check your map to see if they're friendly or not. It's a good way to do a quick double check. Number 2, when it comes to your tactical map, it's laid out in grid sectors. Some missions will require you to go in and find specific things, but in specific sectors, not exactly telling you where they are, but they might give you the sort of coordinates associated with it. Now, at a top level, it could get hard to see where the grid lines are drawn or what sector you're in, but if you zoom in, you can end up seeing exactly where you're at. It'll have the sector X by X, specifically by your cursor there, that helps you quickly identify what grid sector you're in. As for your character, this is an insanely important one because not only does it showcase your loot on you and what you have for immediate access, but also your actual health tab is going to be insanely useful in diagnosing what kind of heals you'll need if you get injured. Here you'll find useful information like blood, hydration, energy, intoxication, and radiation levels. The latter of those you might not experience until a little later on in your gameplay loop as you venture further and further towards ground zero. You'll have the mention of stamina, where running, mantling, or vaulting, going long periods without eating or drinking, all the weight of all the items in your backpack, that's all going to contribute to your general fatigue level. Blood is something you'll lose when shot at, essentially your health overall. Basic things like bandages can help heal this and slow the rate that you lose blood at, but if you take substantial damage, you'll need something like a blood bag to increase the blood level by a few hundred at a time. Hydration can be increased based on drinks like water, colas, and other bottled substances. Energy can be increased by eating items, granolas or e-bars, canned goods, or other general food items. Sometimes with food you'll have that trade-off of gaining energy, but if the item was like salty of sorts, it'll take away from your hydration levels a bit as well. When it comes to healing, you'll want to pay attention to the things that your health panel shows and where your X-rayed skeleton showcases. Things like flesh wounds will only need bandages, and in some cases, simply painkillers, which are like your Ebolans. Things on a deeper level, like bones, will require splints or surgery kits. Excessive bleeding may be stopped with tourniquets, and others alike. But again, certain things help treat certain issues. Now, as for your inventory, by default, you'll have the ability to get a helmet, glasses, balaclava, a primary weapon, headphones, vest, a knife, a secondary, with utility items of a chest carrier, backpack, sling or hip pouch, safe lock, and pockets. Your safe lock is where you can store items that if you die, you'll have those upon respawn and not lose those. Everything else, though, will be on that dead body that you'll have to venture into and get once again. Each of those storage items can be upgraded via purchase or completion of tasks where vendors will grant you better items, again like your backpack. As you progress, you can end up expanding your safe lock to a 3x3 by max, but each of those items also has a wear level where if you inspect them, it'll show like 100% as opposed to if you're down to 84, it's taken damage, and the lower obviously blocks less damage against an enemy, though no matter how protective you have, a round to the face will still be lethal. If looting enemies, you want to make sure that you open their items on their person to access the things you'll want to see. AI will hold a number of things like food, drink, ammo, some weaponry, some keys for locked areas, and more, but a lot of that will be hidden within their bag or their hip pouch or pockets or stuff like that. So make sure you open those up so you can see what you can end up looting and dragging and dropping into your inventory. As for weaponry, this game is incredibly in-depth. Of course, you have a ton of customizations where certain items are not compatible, certain ammunitions are not compatible, so you want to make sure you familiarize yourself with your inventory and the associated items you have before going off into combat so you don't get into a sticky situation where you might not necessarily be able to recover in real time. For combat, holding by default the left alt will steady your scoped weapon, which can be incredibly beneficial at taking engagements at long range, and reloading will only work if you have corresponding magazines in your vest. It cannot be in your backpack, so you want to make sure you have that in the right locations so that you can reload quickly, and it'll be something that if you're using semi-auto versus full auto, you might be reloading more often than not. Weapon inspects, you can check your round in the magazine by holding V. Inspecting your weapon for the animation is Alt V, and then reloading is R. Again, it will only work if you have the corresponding mag in your vest. It cannot be in your backpack. For inventory management, bring along ammunition on missions instead of magazines if you want to save some space, because magazines will take 2 spots in your inventory as opposed to a stack of ammunition taking 1. But again, to each their own, because if you do go into full auto, like we mentioned, you're probably going to be reloading more often than not, so you'll want more magazines rather than just regular ammunition. But if you take regular ammunition, you can just load that in as a magazine becomes empty. Now, as for your tasks and vendors, vendor purpose-wise, selling your items, you can buy or sell items in your inventory to specific vendors to get cash, but what you'll primarily be interacting with, as my guess, is your tasks on offer from each vendor. This is essentially your mission you can go in and do one at a time, where once completed, you'll end up getting cash and specific rewards out of that. Some of the stuff really does reward you with good stuff, so you want to make sure that you, of course, do this, and that's also how you gain access to better weaponry, better equipment and gear, along with a ton of other stuff. Now, coming back to one of the first things we mentioned, again, you have to redeem them via the tasks tab of the vendor tab at the base camp, and then once completed, you have to sometimes hand over items in that same tab, but once you complete the mission, the rewards will be in your messaging system, so you have to go to that to claim those items. They're not just automatically put in your inventory and your stash accordingly. Now, beyond that, of course, there's a whole world to explore. There's a ton of things to familiarize yourself with and a ton of combat to be had. There's raidable bases, among other things. There are specific items that can make things like helicopter noise decreased in terms of certain headphones. A ton of stuff to explore and a ton of missions to complete. But for the most part, I think that covers all the basic bases here in regards to Gray Zone Warfare and getting yourself started as a beginner's guide. So that, I think, is what we're going to call it. Just wanted to give you guys some helpful tips and pointers here on what you should be looking for, how you can better your initial experience, and more. So that's where we're going to wrap it up. I'd love to get your thoughts and feedback down below. Did you find this helpful at all, insightful in any way, shape, or form? And would you like to see more Gray Zone coverage in regards to tips, guides, tutorials, all that kind of stuff? I'd love to get your thoughts. But let me know your thoughts down below. Drop a like if you guys enjoyed the video, and make sure to subscribe for more FPS content. I'd love to have you in the community, but for now, thanks so much for watching. My name is Espresso. I'll see you later. Take care, and peace.